Good morning. Today's daf is daf Tzadik Dalid, 94, and in Bava Basra. Let me share my screen and we will get really started. Yesterday, we got up to the second Mishnah of the 6th chapter of Bava Basra, and we're continuing to discuss the implications of transactions where there was no explicit agreement about the details. A stam transaction, a flat, plain transaction, no details of what's included, what's not included. So the question is sort of what are the terms that are implied in such a contract? And as a reminder, what we're really saying is it depends on the local customs. And what the Gemara is, what the Mishnah and Gemara are describing are what the customs were at the time. To the extent that those customs have changed, so then we would follow the current customs. But let's take a look and see what we're dealing with. And again, this we're going to pick up on the second wide line near the bottom of Tzadik Gimel Amabet with the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is going to address the level of acceptable impurities. Meaning, I say that I'm selling you grain. So how much non-grain can be in the grain that I sell you? So that's the question that we're going to be dealing with right now. And again, picking up with the Mishnah near the bottom of Tzadik Gimel Amabet. So hamocher perus l'chaveiro, you sell produce to your friend, and Rashbam clarifies that when we say perus here, we mean tavua, grain. So you selling the grain. Harei zeh mekabel alav, and who's the harei zeh going on? That this person is going to accept it. So again, the Rashbam helps us out and says halokeach, the buyer, the purchaser is going to have to accept it. Rova tinofes lisa'ah. 1/4, and what is the quarter of? Rashbam again helps us. Mikabel alav rova hakav, 1/4 of a kav for every saw. Well, there are 6 saw in a kav, so 1/4 of a kav would be 1/24 of the overall saw. And so let's finish that Rashbam. Mikabel alav rova hakav shel tinofes, that the buyer needs to accept a 1/4 kav of soiled produce, soiled something, right? L'kol saw, for every saw. Now, what exactly tinofes refers to, and what constitutes soil? Could it just be total trash or what? So that's going to be, we'll see that in a moment. Distam tvua, that ordinary tvua, darkali yopa rova tinofes. It ordinarily has a 1/4 kav of soiled material in it. Aval yota mirova, but if it were to have more than a 1/4 kav, lo, then we will see in the Gemara that you do not need to accept it. Kedem mefarish, time of the Gemara, as we will explain the reasoning in the Gemara. And the Gemara will note that there are 2 possible, that if there's more than a 1/4 kav, not only does the seller need to pay you for the, is it an invalid transaction? It's an invalid transaction. You do not need to accept it. And it's not enough for the person to take out and replace part of the saw, that is the overage, with good stuff. It's not like you can just make that kind of change, but rather the entire amount of tinofes, not just the overage, needs to be recompensed to the buyer. So, and the question that the Gemara will deal with, imishum dina, is it that should be the law? Meaning, is that just the strict reading of the law? Imishum kanasa, or is it kansa, or is it a knas that is saying a penalty that we're saying, look, you, the seller, sold more than you were supposed to, that had more trash in it. So we are going to effectively assume that you did it on purpose, and therefore you need to make up the entire you have to pay for all of the bad stuff in the grain, not just what is beyond the quarter kav for every saw. Okay, so that's with respect to grain. How
Well,
about
why not
figs?
just say it's a mekach taut and then force the seller to accept his product back and start all over again and just cancel the whole deal?
You
Why?
can. It seems like that would be permitted, meaning that it would be that it seems like it's not completely clear, but it seems like the buyer has the option to either reject the entire transaction or insist on being repaid for all of the non-good grain that was included. Not completely clear. We'll see in the Gemara that it's that we're what the story is, but the way I'm reading the Gemara is that the buyer has the option between those two.
Well, you wonder
Okay.
also if there's a time limit. For instance, today you buy lettuce at the store and you have to
Yes.
bring
Oh,
it home and it's bad
absolutely.
lettuce and you bring it back
Absolutely
to the
there would be a
store.
time limit.
You bring it back to the store with a receipt and the store says, okay, we'll take it. But if you bring it back 3 months later, the keeper is going to say, no, we're not taking the lettuce back.
100%, 100%. And that, of course, is got to be the case here. Again, we of course are not dealing with every aspect of the details, but you're absolutely right that you have to get back to the seller in a timely fashion. You certainly can't wait an amount of time that would contribute to the situation getting worse. And we'll see that some of the things that we're talking about are such that actually, we're talking about things that may not get any worse. So let's take a look and you'll see what I'm talking about. So, but first, let's go through the rest of the Mishnah. Again, we're now at the third of the wide lines in the bottom of Tzad Gimel Amud Bet. Fifth word on the line, te'enim. When it comes to the figs, mikabel alav eser. The buyer needs to accept 10 bad figs, mitulas that are wormy, lemeya for every 100. And again, Rashbam highlights that that's the way it often is the case, meaning this is before pesticides and the like. And so as a result, you're going to have some proportion that are wormy and disgusting. And so that's the way it would ordinarily be, about 10%. And Rashbam adds here that it would even be true for 1 out of 10, meaning that it doesn't only apply in bulk. It's not just that it's 10 out of 100, but maybe it would be different for 1 out of 10, but 10% is the bottom line. So similarly, martiv shel yayin, you buy a cellar of wine, mikabel alav eser kosos lemeya. You have to be willing to accept 10 bad barrels for every 100. Kan kanim basharon, if you're taking kegs of produce in the Sharon, well, again, makabel alav eser pitasos lemeya. You need to accept 10 less good ones, 10 bad ones for every 100. The Gemara is going to deal with that. I think we'll deal with that over the weekend, is exactly what that is all talking about. So now the Gemara is going to raise a quote, a brisa that Rav Katina taught that offers a proportion for legumes. So tiny Rav Katina, and when I say proportion for legumes, just to be clear, I mean a proportion of legumes in the wheat. So meaning that, and indeed, this is one of the reasons that we have the prohibition of kitnios, that we don't have legumes on Pesach, because often they were processed together. And so often you would find legumes in the wheat and wheat in the legumes. So rova kitnis l'sa, 1/4 cup of legumes in a sa of wheat needs to be accepted. As Rashbam explains, first Rashbam on the Gemara, Tani Rav Katina, ha rova tunefes demaslisin. When we referred to a soiled product in the Mishnah, lab afruris myri, it wasn't referring to actual soil, actual dirt. The afruras rova lo machil inish. That again, according to the simple reading of Rav Katina's of this brisa, a rova kav of dirt would not be sufficient, would be too much for somebody to accept. Ela rova kitnis l'sah shel tvua, but rather it was a rova of legumes. That is what we're talking about when we say soiled material. So that's what we're referring to. Meaning it's not obviously the wheat. That's what you bought and that's what you want. But it's got to be. It can't be literally trash or dirt as a situation.
What's the sense? What's the sense of lo machil inish?
I can't hear you.
What is the sense here? What's the meaning here of lo machil inish?
That a person will not waive their right to the fact that they need to be given the produce that they desired, meaning the customer is not going to be willing to accept this amount of dirt in the saw of wheat that he has purchased. So now the Gemara asks, V'afru friz lo? 1 second. Are you telling me that our Mishnah is not teaching us that even soil, even dirt would be acceptable? V'hama Rabba bar Chaya, Ketosva, that Rabba bar Chaya from Ketosva, Mishmei de Rabba said in the name of Rabba, Borer Truor Migarno Shel Chavero. If you take out pebbles from the granary of your friend, well then, as we turn to Tzadik Dalet Amud Aleph, nosin lo demei chitin, you have to pay him as if the volume of the stones that you took out were actual grain. Now, the only reason that you would need to do that is because the person you did that for, right? I went to your granary, Stan, I took out stones, so you might think, wow, David did such a big favor for me, right? That's what maybe somebody might think. But the truth is I've done you such a bad thing because you were going to sell Ken a bushel of wheat with pebbles for $100. Now you're going to sell him that same bushel of wheat, but now it's going to be 100% wheat. So you are going to end up losing as a result. And so as a result, I have to pay you damages for the damage that I did. Let's take a look at, we'll look both at Rashbam and at Tosos. So first the Rashbam, no sein lo demei chitim, sha'arei hivchiso b'mida. I've reduced the measurement of that you have. De'iyu have a mizabinlei, that Stan was going to be able to sell it. Imachitin, he was going to be able to sell these pebbles with the wheat. The afruris mekabel okeach, because as we're questioning Rav Katina's statement, because it seems like buyers do accept pebbles and dirt. Aval lachzor v'la arev einu yachol. Now, 1 second. Why don't we say, listen, David pulled out the pebbles. Have Stan just put the pebbles back in. Why isn't that good? So the Rashbam explains, you can't just do that. Dahashta osa ola biyadayim, because now you're doing it affirmatively. Viksiv, and what does the Torah tell us? Lo tasu evel. You can't do some injustice. That's unjust what you're doing. V'gam lo keyach lo machil, and moreover, the customer is not going to accept it. When is the customer going to accept a little bit of pebbles in the wheat? When it happens naturally. But you go ahead and affirmatively put the pebbles in. Exactly. It's unethical. That's the meaning of lo tasu evel, that you're not allowed to do something unjust, unethical. Ela mashanis arav ma'atzmo. It's only what got mixed in on its own. Imatvua, with the wheat, that the Bal Korcha shall mocher, against the will of the mocher, or at least without any active participation of the seller. Borer hatzur umashlich chutz hezek biyadayimhu. Now the question is what have I really done? Because all I've done, I haven't touched your wheat. I've only taken out and removed and thrown away the pebbles. What are the pebbles worth? Zero. They're worth nothing. So what's the hook that makes me liable in this situation? That's what the Rashbam is now going to explain. And this is a very, very important Rashbam in the concept of understanding the nature of damage. So
why wouldn't that be acceptable if the Mocher wants to give a pure product to his
of course
buyer?
It's acceptable. 100% it's acceptable. But I've stolen from Stan, because if Stan sold you the bushel with the pebbles in it, you would have gotten less wheat and you would still accept it. And so now he's out wheat. He's out actual wheat as a result of my removal of those pebbles. He's going to
out wheat?
What?
Who's out wheat?
Stan is the seller who's selling it to you. You end up with a better product. You're very fortunate. But Stan's not going to get paid extra for that. And so as a result, Stan is losing out, because he would be able to sell a bushel to you and to Charlie. And now he has a full bushel for you, but he doesn't have a full bushel for Charlie. And so as a result, he's going to lose out on his ability to sell all of his wheat.
I would think it's more ethical. No, okay, but
again, remember that the point here, Ken, let me stop you, because we're never going to finish today's daf. The point is that you are willing to accept a certain amount of impurities. And the amount of impurities that Stan is giving you is beneath that level, is no more than that level. So you're willing to accept the impurities that you're getting. So yes, I have made his product better for you, but I have diminished his ability to sell to you, to Charlie, and to Moshe. He's not going to have enough produce any longer, so he's losing out. So now the Rashbam, again, we're now in the top narrow line on the Rashbam and Tzadik Dalet and Aleph. And the question is why is my removal of something that is worthless on its own now somehow going to be considered damage to Stan? This sending away of these pebbles is a direct, by hand, sense of damage. Sha'otan sroros hayulo shavin kamochitin, because these pebbles were worth to Stan the exact amount of that amount of wheat.
And by me selling it to you, I'm still below the threshold.
Correct. You were still below the threshold. The inami, or we could say lo chashivi lehezik gamor, that it's not necessarily considered a full hezek to mekom hein gufan ein shavin klum, because maybe we should say, look, the stones aren't worth anything. L'chayev miha, but nevertheless he is going to be obligated mishum dina de garmi. Now, we have seen over the course of our travels through Shas that there are two kind of indirect damages in the Gemara. There's something called garmi, for which one is liable, and there's something called grama, which is totally indirect, which is not liable. This Rashbam, very important Rashbam, will highlight for us Rashbam's opinion about when something is garmi and when something is grama. There are, I will note, problems with this, and we saw earlier in Maseches Bava Basra a Tosos that dealt with this same question and offered three different interpretations of why something would be garmi versus grama. None of them are equal to this, I don't think, were equal to this particular explanation. So we'll have now essentially four explanations. But the bottom line is that is a major issue discussed by the Rishonim as to what is the difference between grama and garmi, because you're liable for garmi and not for grama. So the example, an example that the Rashbam quotes of garmi is burning a contract, burning an IOU. If I burn an IOU, that you Stan are due from Charlie, have I affected the Charlie's liability? No, Charlie still owes you the money. The IOU is just evidence But
Correct.
now, do you have any evidence
No.
any longer? No, you don't have any evidence. So it is now going to be much more difficult for you to
Correct.
collect. And so as a result, I have most definitely harmed you, but I have not nullified the underlying loan. So as a result, that, according to the Rashbam, is an example of garmi. And similarly, v'hamakadesh bekerem v'hazoreya kilayim b'sadeh. If I put wheat in your vineyard or put other kinds of klayim together in your field, so now your field, even though the grapes look like the grapes and everything looks exactly as it should, but now everything in your field is
Mixed.
all not kosher because it's mixed. So besade chavero debahi shaisa kagazalei miyad mimamono, and because at that moment it is as if I am stealing from you. Af al pi she'eino nikar, even though the theft that I've done from you is not obvious, meaning you can't see, you can't point to the theft and say, oh, that's what you stole. Similarly, he's saying the stones may not be worth anything, so you can't point to something that I quote unquote stole from you, and yet you suffered an immediate damage that was done directly by me. Daha paskin and hilchas of Bava Kama, because that's what we say in Bava Kama, Rebbe Meir, like Rebbe Meir, to da'in dinin did garmi, that we say that you do have a judgment of garmi, meaning that you are liable for garmi. V'amrina nami hasam, and we said over there, hava ubda the kafia rap from the Rav Ashi, that Rav Ashi had burnt a contract when he was young, and Rafram forced him to pay it. And he forced him to collect it and to allow the person who burned the contract, whose contract was burnt, to get it. Kishura Litzalmi. And similarly, like a beam that somebody used for sculpture, the grama benizikin de kaimalan de putter. And and the point is that kind of damage is considered direct and affirmative damage, just like I were to take your beam and do something with it, and now I've stolen your beam because you can't put it in the ceiling any longer. But the grama b'nezikin the kaimalan de putter. But when it comes to grama, that is exempt. So that's an example. An example of grama is if I give a fire to somebody who's not responsible. I give it to a child. I give it to somebody who's got mental incapacities. I've got to give it to somebody who has no ability to learn or speak or have any kind of conversation. Shahahezek nikar. Aval eno osa oto biyadayim. Well, in that situation, the eventual damage, meaning the burning of the field, you can point to that burning of the field. But did I do it directly with my hand? No, I most certainly did not. And so as a result, the Rashbam is differentiating between if the damage is visible, but I didn't do it with my hand, well, then I'm not going to be liable. But if the damage is not visible and I did it directly with my hand, then it's garmi and I will be liable. Ela gorim achshav sheyavo hezek mimela la'acher zman. But when it's grama, the point is that I may have caused it now, but I caused it to come automatically after some amount of time. Abaldina de garmi, but when you comes to garmi, vayadayim humazik, he did it directly with his own hand. Elasha'ein ha'hezek nikar, but the damage itself is not obvious. So that is again a very, very important Rashbam in understanding the difference between grama and garmi.
Modern law too today.
Yeah, 100%. Now Tosos here offers another possible explanation for why I would be liable for pulling the pebbles out of Stan's produce. No saying low top Tosos, no saying low to make chitim. Perish Rivam, Dahainu Rebbe Shimon. That actually this Gemara is holding like Rebbe Shimon, because what does Rebbe Shimon say back in Bava Kama Daf Tzadek Cheram Abed? The Amar Davar Hagorim Lamamon Kamamon Dami. That he's the one who says that if I do something that takes away something that may not be worth anything, but it forces you to lose money, then it's as if it's money. And what is the example of it? The classic example, Demachaya Begezel, that because we will make somebody obligated. If somebody stole Begezel Chametz, V'abar Alav Pesach, if I stole Chametz from Ken, and then and Pesach went through. Now, what could I do with that chametz in order to fulfill my obligation to Ken? Remarkably, the Torah is very kind to me and allows me to give back that chametz, which is now over Alav Pesach, and therefore Ken has zero possibility of benefiting from it. I could just give that challah roll that I stole from him right back to him, and he's out of luck. But what happens now if Stan burns that challah roll? If Stan burns that challah roll, now I have to give Ken the actual value of that challah roll. So now when Stan burns that challah roll, the uba achar b'sarfos, third line of the Tosos, and now somebody else comes and burns it, Stan is going to be liable to me for the damage that he caused me, because I was going to be able to give Ken back a roll that was worth nothing, and now I have to pull out of my pocket the money. And so as a result, even though that roll was worthless, what Rivam is understanding, just like that situation, you have these pebbles, that these pebbles are really worth something because they're worth something to me, to the Gazlan. Similarly, the pebbles are worth something to Stan as the one who was the seller. Ulari Nira, the Re goes even further, and he says that, you know what? That machlokas between the Chachamim and Rabbi Shimon over there in Baba Kama, even the Chachamim would agree that in this situation, that it's not just Rabbi Shimon that would agree that the stones are worth something. But even if you ordinarily would say Davar Hagorim Lamamon is not Kamamon, Larinira de Asi Afilu Karabanan, you could even follow the rabbis, Dahasam of over there. Vadai Dahasam, Vadai Lav Kamamon Dami. That over there, it's definitely maybe not like money. She'ena Shava Lashum Adam Klum, Ella La Gazlan. That the only person who values this piece of bread that I stole from Ken is me. There's no one else. Charlie doesn't value it. Moshe doesn't value it. The only person in the entire world that values it is me. And so as a result, in that situation, Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim will disagree. The rabbis will say it's not worth anything, and therefore when Stan burns it, it's my tough luck, and now I just have to pay Ken. And Rabbi Shimon will say, no, when Stan burns it, he caused me damage, and so as a result, he owes me the money that I'm going to have to pay to Stan. So only in that situation. But here, these stones are valuable to anyone, because if Stan sells that bushel with the stones to with the pebbles in it to Ken can now sell that same bushel to Charlie, and Charlie can sell it to Moshe, or Stan could have sold it instead of to Ken to Charlie or to Moshe, meaning those pebbles in that bushel have value to everyone. So lift our bow. Aval hacha habi keilu gazel chitin atzman. Here, when I take out the pebbles, it's as if I stole the underlying wheat. Shehu mocher troros l'kol adam, because Stan can sell those pebbles to anybody. Kamo chitin, as if they were wheat. V'lo dami l'sor. And don't try to bring in grama and garmi, etc. It's not like that situation of burning a contract. Shel chavero dahasam niyara ba'almahu dekalalei v'lo esachov. Meaning, in that situation, the only thing that was destroyed was evidence. It wasn't the underlying thing. Here, I've ruined the underlying thing. I've ruined that bushel for Stan, or at least made it worth less. And so as a result, we now see two different approaches. One focused on Garmi, that's Rashbam. One focused on Davar Hagorim Lamamon Kimamon, and the concept that maybe when you have something that it's worth money to everybody in its current situation, then even the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Shimon would agree that there's liability. Okay, so now we have the question. So that was all to frame the question, right? The question is, we have Rav Katina saying that pebbles are not acceptable by a customer, but legumes are acceptable by a customer. But 1 second, clearly pebbles must be acceptable by a customer because Rabba Bar Chia, in the name of Rabba, said that you're liable if you pick out the pebbles. So kitnis rova, afrurus pachos merova. No. Here's the story. This is the first attempt at the answer. We're going to eventually modify it. That here's the story. When it comes to lentils being in this plate, being mixed in with the wheat, you'll accept a full rova hakav, you'll accept a full quarter kav. But when it comes to soil, when it comes to dirt being in there, well, then you'll accept it, but you won't accept that much. And so now that makes everything consistent. When we refer to nofes in our Mishnah, we're talking about lentils. We're talking about kitnius. We're talking about legumes. And when it comes to dirt, yes, it is true, as Rabbah said, that I'm liable for pulling out the pebbles, but it's talking about a situation as long as there's a lower amount, not a full quarter kav. So afrufris rovelo. 1 second, you want to tell me that in fact one cannot have a quarter kav of dirt? V'hatanya hamocher peris lechavero. If you sell produce to your friend, chitin, when it's wheat that you sell, mekabel alav rova kitnis l'sa, you have to accept a quarter kav of legumes for every sa. Sa'orim, if you sell barley, mekabel alav rova nishovis l'sa, you have to accept a quarter kav of straw for every sa. Adashim, if you sell lentils, mekabel alav rova afruris l'sa, you have to accept a quarter kav of soil for every sa. And we're going to understand this at the moment. Man lav hu adin lechitin l'sorin. Isn't this brisa not being specific? Meaning it was just giving you examples of the kinds of things that could be the impurities. But the bottom line is any of these impurities work. So no, shiny adashim. No, maybe lentils are different. And it's only lentils that you'll accept the dirt. Because lentils are uprooted. And so as a result, it's more natural for there to be dirt in them. 1 second. Well, 1 second. Once you tell me that maybe lentils are different and that in fact you won't accept anything with respect to dirt in other products, but not with respect to wheat and barley, tivshot mina. We should learn from this brisa that in fact wheat and barley customers won't accept any soil. And if that's true, then we have a problem on Rabbah. So it can't be that that's the interpretation. So what's the point of telling us about adashim and dirt? So la'olam really chite v'sari mekabel afruris. At the end, we have to say that when you sell wheat and barley, the customer will accept even dirt. Adashim isrichalei. And yet, this brisa was necessary to tell us something very important with respect to lentils. Because I might have thought that since the lentils come out of the dirt, maybe the customer will accept a greater percentage than 1 out of 24. Kamash Malan, the brisa comes to teach us that only 1 out of 24 is acceptable. Okay, so now the Gemara teaches us an additional law regarding impurities, and then we're going to have a series of challenges, a series of 8 challenges. We will not go through all 8 challenges today. That will leave some of the challenges, God willing, for Shabbos, leave it for tomorrow. So Amar Rav Huna im balanapos. Now, Rashbam gives a very important interpretation to this, but let's first translate it literally, and then we'll understand. If you come to sift, menapa es kulo, you sift everything. So there are a number of ways that we can read this. But the Rashbam gives us a way that I think makes the absolute most sense, and I think is the real understanding of this Gemara. So, top of the wide lines in the Rashbam, end of the line. Amar Rav Huna imba. Imba lo keach. So the Rashbam is saying, we're dealing with a customer who comes, lahakbid b'tinofis, and he's like, I think that there is too much other stuff, too much impurities in the bushel that you sold me, Stan. And so denir be'ena, because it seems to his eye, sheyesh bo tinofis yoser mirova. It looks like it's more than a rova. And now ubalo keach linfo. So now I go and I sift lidas im yesham yoter mirova. And I go to check out to see whether there's too much. The nimtza bo yoter. And now it turns out that there was too much. So then, menapa et kulan. So then I get to sift out everything. And Rashbam again explains, B'yachzor lo hamocher chitin kenegdan. You, Stan, need to give me, if I now bring to you more than a quarter kav of impurities, you have to replace that entire quarter kav of impurities with good wheat. You can't.
Penalized.
You're penalized, exactly. If it was less than a quarter kav, the deal would have been fine. Nobody would be able to complain, and I would be stuck with it. And I just was misestimating with my eye. But if in fact it's too much, you are getting penalized because you could have gotten away. This is. There was a famous line that one of my mentors used to use all the time with respect to running a strategic business. And that is, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. So meaning
Wall Street,
right? Exactly. On Wall Street, that's exactly.
Bulls make money, bears get burnt,
yeah.
pigs get slaughtered.
Yeah, exactly. So the point is that if you're just trying to make a little extra, so you'll be okay. But if you try to make a lot extra, you're gonna get it. So okay, so keep continuing on back in this Rashbam, third of the wide lines in the Rashbam. So you either have to pay me, and again, this was the point I think along the lines of Ken was asking. You either have to pay me now for the all the impurities, or you need to give me valid wheat for it. Below Yomar, and you don't get to say, Stan's not going to be able to say Rova Kfar Machalta, that you already were Mochel, you already waived your right to accept at least a Rova Kav. V'hamoser ashalamach, and I'm just going to pay you for the extra. No, you don't get to do that. You put in too much, we're going to say that you have to pay. And Amrela. So now back in the Gemara, we're 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 12 lines up, 11 or 12 lines up. Second word on the line. Amrila.
Does he have to replace the wheat?
Yes, he has a choice. He either can replace the wheat with wheat, or he has to place the dirt with wheat, or he has to pay me the value of the weight of that dirt in wheat.
Right, so we're saying here that he has to pay the entire the value, not just the portion beyond the 1/4, right?
Exactly.
But if he decides to pay him in wheat, does he have to pay the entire weight that could have been affected, or just up to the point of the rova?
No, the entire, not just up to the point of the rova.
So he replaces it. So now the person gets pure wheat, 100%.
Exactly.
Stringent penalty.
Okay. So Amri la Dina, va Amri la Kanasa. So some people say that this is the law, and some people say, no, this is just a penalty. Amri la Dina, some people say that this is the strict law, because Mandi Yahiv Zuze, that the one who pays the customer, Apiri Shapiri Yahiv, he wants good stuff. Virova lo tarach inish. And for a quarter kav of impurities, it's not worth the effort to remove it. However, Yoser Mirova, Tarach inish. But when it's got more than that level of impurities, it's worth it to remove it. And so as a result, the Kavan did Tarach, and now since he did the work, Tarach b'chule, he should do the entire work, and he needs to now get the whole thing. Meaning that really, technically, what this is saying is that really when Stan sells me wheat, I have the right, even though, even when it's less than a quarter kav, to sift. That technically, from a legal perspective, if we were looking at the strict law, that I would have the right to do the sifting. But it's not worth it for me, and it's not worth it for the vast majority of people. And therefore, we're going to say that all people will waive in that situation. But once it's worth more, once it's more than that quarter kav, now all of a sudden it is worth it for me, and I'm entitled to what I was really entitled to in the first place, which is 100% wheat. This is also, of course, consistent with the point that the Rashbam made earlier. You can't just mix in bad stuff. If you mix in bad stuff, even if it stays less than a quarter kav, you are stealing and violating the Torah. It's only when it happens naturally that this is permitted. Okay, so that's
anyone has the opportunity to sift if he wants to, but how does he know by just looking at it that it's less than a quarter or more than a quarter? He just
of course, is these people are experienced. That's their trade. When you do it, when you do this kind of business every day, I'm sure that you get good at it. Exactly. So v'amri like knasa, and some people say that this is a penalty. And why is it a penalty? Rova shchiach, because a quarter kav is so common, it's so frequent, and so as a result, it's not about the work, it's about the frequency. But yoser lo shchiach, but when it's more than that, it's not common. Ve'ihu de'ariv, and in that situation, you know what? If we were to ask what's the most likely cause of there being too much impurities,
natural causes,
no, if it's too much, what's the reason? Someone tampered with it. Right. Exactly. The EU da'ariv. We're going to say that the seller actually did it on purpose. The kaven da'ariv. And since now the most likely explanation for there being too much is that he mixed it in, kansua rabbanan b'chule. The rabbi said, you know what? You're going to have to pay the whole thing. Okay. So now that we have this framework, maybe it's a knas, maybe it's not, maybe it's the din. We're now going to go through and ask a whole series of questions, many of which are on the general theme of Rav Huna, namely that we seem to penalize the guy, or at least make him deal with the whole thing, the whole problem, and other situations where we do not do that. So let's take a look. So Meisvei. So we ask a question, and again, we're going to deal with how many of these questions are we going to do? We're going to deal with 5 of these questions. It's not each of the questions don't go that long. We'll get through them, and then we'll be done for the day. So Meisei, kol sa sheyesh ba rova mimin acher, when you have a saw that concludes a quarter kav of other kinds of seed, and this is a Mishnah in Kalayim, so we're going to be talking about Kalayim. You need to reduce the amount of other kinds of seeds before you plant them. Svaruha. So what does it seem? Derova de Kalayim biyoser mirova de hacha. That it seems like when it comes to Kalayim, the issue is exactly a quarter kav is a problem. Because if you have a quarter kav, this Mishnah is telling us you have to reduce. Well, that's like more than a quarter kav of this situation, because in our situation, you accept the quarter kav. So the katana yimai, and yet, nonetheless, we say all you have to do is reduce. You don't have to eliminate every one of the other seeds. So even though a quarter kav is bad, in the case of when it comes to Kalayim, we don't say you have to go to 0, and yet here Rav Huna says you have to go to 0. So isn't this a question on Rav Huna? So no, it's not a question on Rav Huna. De rova de Kalayim ki rova de hakadami. Really, a quarter kav in the case of Kalayim is exactly like a quarter kav here, meaning that biblically a quarter kav is fine when it comes to seeds. But and it's just a rabbinic requirement. So ihachi, if that's true, amayimai. Well, then why, if it's biblical that you are okay, why do you need to reduce it all? Mishum dechumra de kalayim. Well, you need to reduce because of the stringency associated with kalayim. Well, ihachi, if that stringency is what's going on, amos seifa. What about the end of that Mishnah? Rabbi Yossi Omer, as we turn to Tzadik Dalet Amabet, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi Omer Yavor, that you actually that you have to actually get rid of all of it. I Amrat Bishlamana, if you want to say Biyoser, I'm sorry, Kiyoser Meirova Tinofis Dame, that in fact the quarter kav in a case of Kalayim is like more than a quarter kav when it comes to a sale transaction. Now we can understand the machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi. Tanakama savar lo kansinan hetera atu isura. We're not going to penalize and make the planter reduce beyond what is biblically required. But Rabbi Yossi savar kansinan, and Rabbi Yossi says no, we are going to make him reduce. But Elai Amrat. But if you're saying, as you're saying, Kirova dummy, that a quarter kav of seed mixtures when it comes to Kalayim is exactly like a quarter kav of impurities in connection with a sale, Amayavor. Why does Rabbi Yossi say that you need to get rid of all of it? You shouldn't have to do that. So no, you have to get rid of it because has some time to Rabbi Yossi. Here's the reasoning of Rabbi Yossi. Mishum demechse ki mekayim Kalayim, because it looks like you are accepting Kalayim. Because the point is the following, and Rashbam makes this point directly, that once the person has begun working with the Kalayim, it looks like that in fact you are it looks like that you're in fact now affirmatively doing Kalayim. Because even though you were removing the bad seeds, you were working with it and you left bad seeds there. So that looks bad. So as a result, that's the situation. So really, you can't prove anything from Kalayim. So Tashma, second challenge.
But you're allowed to keep a small amount, right? Less than a roba, it's not.
Well, that's the machlokas between, that's the machlokas between Rabbi Yossi. It seems like everybody would agree that if it was always less than a rova hakav, you're totally fine. And the machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and the Tanakama is if it was equal to a rova hakav or more than rova hakav, and now you reduced it, do you have to reduce it to 0, or is it sufficient to reduce it to less than a quarter kav? Tashma, next challenge. Shnayim shehevkidu eitzel echad. Zem mana v'zem matayim. So Stan and I leave with Charlie 2 different amounts of money. One of us leaves 100, one of us leaves 200. Well, guess what? When we come back to claim it, what are we coming back to ask for? Zeomer matayim should leave, zeomer matayim should leave. We both tell Charlie we are, we were the ones that we're the 200 person. So nosin lezem mana v'zem mana. So the Tanakama in this brisa. Mishnah. This Mishnah is in Bava Metzia, Lamed Zion. That both of us say that both of us get back 100. V'hashar yehei munach ad sheyavo Eliyahu, and the last 100 stays set aside until Eliyahu comes. And so, what's going on? Well, it seems like we are not penalizing the person who certainly lied. Well, that shows that we don't penalize somebody, and yet here we were saying that we do penalize the guy. So if we say that the halacha is based on the idea that Rav Huna's statement is a penalty, why should that be the case? Why are we penalizing the guy here and not over there? Well, haki hashta, what kind of comparison is that? Hasam vaday mana lamar umana lamar. The 100 that each one gets they definitely own it. But haka mi yamar delav kule aruve ariv. But maybe in this situation where there was too much impurities, maybe Stan the seller was trying to pull a fast one, and he actually did mix in all of the impurities. And who's to say that that wasn't the case? And so as a result, that's why we might do an extra penalty over there and not do one here. Well, in second, Tashma Mesefa, third effort to challenge. What about the end of that Mishnah in Bava Metzia, where we say, Amar Rebbe Yossi, Im Kain, Ma Hefsid Haramai. What does the tricker guy lose? He hasn't lost anything. Ella, therefore, Hakol Yehei Munach Ad Sheyavo Eliyahu. Rabbi Yossi says we have to leave all of it aside. Doesn't this support Rav Huna? Because now it shows that we penalize the seller by making him buy back all the soiled product? No, again, Haki Hashta, are you going to say that these cases are comparable? No, they're not. Hasam Vadai Ika Ramai. In that situation where Stan and I each gave Charlie a certain amount of money, one of us is certainly lying. But Hacha, Miyamer de Aruve Irub. Maybe when Stan sold me the bushel, it was a natural occurrence that it ended up being a little too much. It wasn't, he didn't do anything wrong. And so as a result, we shouldn't, there's no Kal V'chomer that says we should punish this guy more than we should punish the guys in the other case. Indeed, maybe there's a basis to say we shouldn't punish him. So as a result, you can't necessarily say that Rabbi Yossi proves Rav Huna or supports Rav Huna's ruling. So challenge number 4. What about the following brisa? Tashma, shtar sheyesh bo ribis. If you have a contract that has a requirement that one pays interest in it, Konsinoto. The Tanakama, this is Rebbe Meir. We're going to see at the end of this that it's Rebbe Meir speaking at the moment, that we penalize him. And the Ein Gova, lo as a Karen, the lo as a ribis. And we don't allow the creditor to collect anything. We're not going to allow the creditor to collect the principal, and we're not going to allow the creditor to collect the interest. Very big penalty that we would have on somebody who charges interest. That's what Rebbe Meir says. Now, therefore, what are we saying? Where we see that we penalize the guy. So here too, isn't this a good support for Rav Huna? No. Haki hashtam. Is that any kind of proof? Hasam mishak siva hu avad le shuma suma. As soon as he wrote the contract, that is the placing of the interest. That's the charging of the interest. That's the violation of the Torah. Hacha miyamer da aruve ariv. But here, can you say for any kind of certainty that that Stan mixed in impurities? We can't. And so as a result, it's not a proof. Finally, Tashma Mesefa. Well, 1 second. What about the end of that brisa? The end of that brisa says that the lender is allowed to collect the principal, but not allowed to collect the interest. So doesn't that show, when it comes to the permitted portion of something that you did illegally, that we allow you to do the permitted item? And so as a result, Rav Huna, who says that you will penalize the guy and you make him take out even the impurities that are normally acceptable, should be rejected. No, again, Haki Hashta. Are these two comparable? Again, they're not. Hasam Bade Karna de Haterahu. When it comes to the principal, the person who's lent on interest is always allowed to charge, to ask to be paid back the principal. That's permitted. But Hakami Yamar de Kulelo Aruve Aruv, even if we say that the principal is allowed, here, when it came to the impurities, maybe Stan mixed in the impurities, and therefore, really, he deserves to be penalized. So at the end of the day, you cannot compare all of these cases. We tried 5 different times. None of the 5 times were successful, neither to contradict nor to support Rav Huna, but we've got 3 more efforts. But for them, you'll need to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.
In some cases, it seems that they are, if I understood this correctly, that in some of these cases, these harot, we would want to say that the seller should be penalized, as opposed to the case brought from another Gemara where he's not penalized. But in some cases, we're saying that he shouldn't be penalized compared to the cases in the Gemara elsewhere a person is penalized. Is that correct?
Exactly. That you are exactly right. We are looking for places where there's been a penalty or there hasn't been a penalty. When there's been a penalty elsewhere, our question is, can we say that this is a proof for Rav Huna? And when there isn't a penalty, we're asking, does this contradict Rav Huna? And in each of the cases, whether it's an effort to try and support Rav Huna or an effort to contradict Rav Huna, we've highlighted that the unique aspect of this case is that we don't know. That we don't know whether the seller did something wrong or didn't do something wrong. Did Stan put in extra impurities or not? We don't know. And yet, in that situation, Rav Huna is penalizing the guy. And so, but we know that there was something that was wrong because it was too much. So the point is that there's both in the situation that we have with Rav Huna, there's both an aspect of definitely something wrong is happening because there was too much impurity, and there's uncertainty because we don't know whether all of the impurities were caused improperly. Whereas in all of the other cases, either the point that we're talking about is where we know that somebody was entitled to get something back because they definitely owned it, or the point is that we don't know in those situations where we did penalize somebody, we penalize them because we know for a fact that they did something wrong, which isn't the case here. So you're exactly right. We go in both directions. When we say that when we bring in a case where there was a penalty, we're asking, how do doesn't that support Rav Huna? And we bring a case in that there wasn't a penalty, we're saying, doesn't this challenge Rav Huna?
All right. Okay.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking, but it went by. That's what I was thinking, but
yeah, exactly. So if that's what you were thinking, then you were thinking exactly correctly. Wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Have a great weekend. Looking forward to continuing our learning together.
And what are you doing next week? Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, thank you for asking. We will be learning before Mincha, almost for sure before Mincha rather than between Mincha and Marav. So before Mincha, each of the days of Rosh Hashanah, before Mincha on each of the days of Sukkot, but we will be learning together in the lobby. I don't know what Eli is doing on each of the Shabbosim. He may be doing it as well. We'll stay tuned in the WhatsApp and on the email for the details on that.
And where will we be learning?
My preference is always the lobby because that way nobody gets lost. So, and there's no question of looking or whether the room is locked, etc. So as a result, and you always can get into the lobby. So as a result, my preference is the lobby. So, unless there's something that's happening in the lobby, which I don't expect, we'll be learning in the lobby together. And Moshe will be missing you, but we wish you a Shana Tova, Ksiva Chasima Tova. I still have one more day of Zoom and in person. That will be next Wednesday, Erev Rosh Hashanah, and I look forward to learning together then. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and I'll find some other dafs to do over Yontiv.
All right, we'll miss you.
All together.
Bye.